Today I'd like to talk a bit about science and spirituality. Um, in the last time I spoke, I was talking about reconciliation. So, how to reconcile science and spirituality, but it's actually not a reconciliation. It's one flows into the other. And I really like the quote by Nobel laureate Werner Heisenberg, who said that something to the effect of, well, if you drink from the glass of science, the first gulp is gonna make you an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. So it's just a matter of going deep enough. So it's that both are not actually in contradiction. They both flow into each other, and if you go deep enough in science, as I said last time, being spiritual is a sign of great scientific development or depth, in my view. So what does it mean to drink from the glass of science, right? I mean, we can't all be scientists, or we can't all be experts in advanced physics to be drinking. So I think for most of us, me included, because I'm definitely not an expert in physics. I cannot fully understand any of the advanced physics and concepts. So I think what drinking means is integrating, being able to integrate some of the concepts of what advanced physics provides into your concept of reality. And that's not easy. That is far from being easy. Our mind hates some of these concepts because they're so abstract, or they even threaten the ego. The ego doesn't feel safe integrating these concepts into its reality. So what are some of these concepts? So I'm not going to go through all of them, but just briefly. One of them being non-locality. So if you take two particles, it doesn't matter how far apart you put them, you can have them in sync. So meaning that if you change a characteristic of one, the other one changes immediately. So there's no time for information to be actually exchanged. They are completely in sync, no matter the distance. So what we perceive as physical distance, that dimension, doesn't seem to apply to some of these concepts of advanced physics, of the fabric of reality. So how do you integrate that? That if that's possible. Of course, we're not talking about really organisms or things like that. I think that's a stretch, but still, we're talking about the fabric of what makes us all real, and that concept applies to that. Another one being the two slit experiment, where you bombard tiny little particles to a impermeable sheet, but there's two slits. So this experiment was conducted to figure out, okay, what is a particle and what is a wave. So if you have a solid particle or semi-solid particle, the particle can only go through one of the slits. So you're going to find its impact on the back end of one slit. If it's a wave, of course, a wave can, like a wave of the ocean, if you have a wave of the ocean hitting a wall, but you have two holes in the wall, well, on both sides of the hole, like, the wave is going to penetrate and leave an impact after the hole. And basically what people observed is that if they want to observe a wave, they would observe a wave. If they feel like they're measuring a particle, they're going to measure a particle, which means that the observation of what makes the fabric of reality, observation of particles, has an impact on the result. So how do you integrate that into your reality? It's a difficult one, another difficult one, you know. So that's why people start to discuss, you know, of course this table is solid, you know, but at the end of the day, we also know that it's 99.9% just empty space, and then there are just particles that take up space based on their vibration. It's not just all solid, and these are difficult concepts to integrate, because what we perceive with our limited sight, our limited audition, everything's limited, you know. We're not perceiving everything. Like the animals that perceive more than we can on particular aspects of vision or audition. So we need to realize that we are extremely limited as humans, what we can see and what we can't see. And the ego always likes to put walls beyond. He doesn't want to see what's beyond its poor little body can perceive. Another concept is string theory. I'm far from being able to understand its tenets, but basically everything, like we kind of like a vibrating rod. So everything's a string in vibration, and how I like to see it, you know, obviously vibration impacts other vibration, and how I like to see it is that we're all within and we are part of a multidimensional like a spider's web. You know, like how spider webs are, you know, if you look at them for a long time, and imagine you see a fly landing on one end, everything vibrates, and that's why the spider knows what's happening on the other side. And I think that's what basically the fabric of reality seems to be like, some characteristics at least, but it's multidimensional, so it's not just 3D. And so imagine you are one point in that web, one intersection point in that web, and you start to do something where what you do, what you are, reverberates throughout the entire web. So everything is connected. Another thing to integrate, which is not very easy. Then there are ones that there's this thought experiment, Schrödinger's cat, you know, another Nobel laureate, Erwin Schrödinger. After having a little chat with Albert Einstein, he came up with a thought experiment. So you must have, it's easy to Google and you find it on Wikipedia. So Schrödinger's cat is basically you put a cat in a box. There's a vial of poison that can be released into the box. So in that case, the cat would be dead. And if the vial is not released or the poison is not released, well, the cat is alive. And so where the thought experiment comes in, imagine you do something that links back to physics. So imagine the trigger to release the poison is some kind of radioactivity measurement of some radioactive decay of a particle, and we can measure that. And then if the instrument measures radioactivity, so decay of the element, it releases the poison. If it doesn't notice any decay, no poison, cat is alive. Well, the problem with that is that we cannot accurately measure subatomic decay, which means that in theory, like, some particle can be decayed but also not decayed. So you have quantum superposition. So both are valid at the same time. But then what happens to the cat? The cat is dead and alive at the same time because it's linked to something that is beyond the binary. So it's not black and white. And so I think this is drinking the glass of science. You know, at the bottom there's God. Like, if you truly integrate these concepts, and again, some of them, you know, whether they're fully established or not, it's beyond my capability to assess. But these concepts are there, and they've been put there by brilliant people. And so I think there's a case can be made to integrate those, but it's not easy, and because it threatens everything we know. Like everything suddenly starts to be possible. If you truly believe that there's something to these concepts, it's possible that they're all true. All of what we perceive, all of reality goes out the window, right? And I think that's what I love about this. These are making choices about beliefs that have a tremendous and lasting impact on how you perceive reality and how you live your life. And again, you can choose to refute these things. You can just discard them, and that's fine too. It's your decision. It's basically my mind process that I'm trying to make transparent here, and I attempt to integrate these concepts, or at least they're being integrated into how I perceive reality. It's part of what I perceive as real. And so this is all advanced physics, right? And where this links back to one of my key interests of also what I talked about last time, our history as a race, history of the planet, universe, multiverse. And so what really is striking to me is that some of these very, very advanced concepts, you can find their signature in very, very old texts, and it comes back to like were there people that knew more, or not necessarily people, but what happened in ancient times? Were they aware of things that we now know to be somewhat true via something very advanced like quantum physics or the quantum world? And one thing I'm referring to specifically because it just triggered my interest and really struck a chord with me. It's the book, the Kybalion, and you can find some. I'll try to put a link in the description box. You can obviously buy this little book, or you can also find. What I like to do is audiobooks. You can listen to it. It's not very long. And I'm not gonna go into like the origin of the Kybalion. It's of no interest to me. I'm pretty sure it's almost like biblical texts. They've been taken right, left, and center. Like the origins of these texts. Someone puts them together, and then someone else changes it and puts something else on top of it. It's of no real relevance, I think. But there are discussions about where it actually comes from. But it's largely attributed to Hermes Trismegistus. So it's Hermeticism. The entire concept behind it, so the teachings of Hermes. And what I love about this book is it has principles. I think 7 principles, I believe, 6 or 7. I can't remember now. It's fairly short. It's concise, but everything resonates, and so these principles are, for instance, mentalism, and mentalism is, well, it basically says that consciousness is before matter. So at the real base of everything, of the entire universe, of what is real, is consciousness. So some kind of mental activity. It's not. If you bring it back to humans, it's like the thought or consciousness comes before the brain. It's not the brain that generates consciousness, it's the other way around. But this principle goes a step beyond. It's like everything, the entire universe or multiverse, what comes before that is consciousness. And again, advanced physics seems to definitely doesn't contradict that fact. It starts to, well, there's emerging evidence that supports that notion that everything is mental. And so everything that you touch seems to be very hard and things like that. It's all based on a higher consciousness that somehow creates three-dimensional physical reality. And there's a lot of corollaries to that, right? So that obviously then immediately fuels into life after death. What are we? Potentially existence of a soul. All of that ties into this, and like what is the source consciousness? So concept like the Kybalion doesn't talk about God, but talks about all there is. And so mentalism is one of these principles. Another one is vibration, and I mean that's fairly established by physics, right? Everything is just in constant vibration. What we perceive as solid is just like vibrating at a very, very, very low frequency, but everything vibrates. That's fairly established, and that's one of the principles of the Kybalion. And what's really interesting also is that so there's vibration, and then another principle. I'm not going to go through all of them. You can read them in my book. I go through all of them if you're really, really interested. But just perhaps read the book by yourself. Maybe some will resonate more than others. So another one is polarity. So polarity is really interesting. So for instance, we all know polarity, right? Cold, hot, hate, love. It's like polar opposites. So the concept of polarity indicates that, well, there's an increment, there's an infinite amount of increments, and it's on a polar scale. So let's take hot and cold, for instance. Nothing is intrinsically hot, or nothing is intrinsically cold. It's just something is colder than another thing. But like what we perceive as hot and cold, just because like, oh, you're gonna burn yourself, or oh, this is really freezing. But it's not intrinsically hot. It's not intrinsically cold. It's just on an axis, and so you can move along that axis anytime you want. Same thing with love and hate. You love something, you hate another thing, and then there's things where you're a bit neutral. It's like, so is it love? Is it hate? Somewhere in the middle. And where that becomes a bit interesting is that once we talk about energies, you can always move something incrementally in any direction. And it's up to you to do that. So anything is possible. You can always move into one direction. You can always transmute one energy into another just by moving along that axis. And this is where the book talks about alchemy. Alchemy not in the sense of, well, we're gonna take that lead and turn it into gold. That's not what alchemy actually is. Alchemy is energetic transmutation, changing one energy into another one. And so I'll stop here for the Kybalion. I think again, read it or listen to it and see if it impacts you. I think, and this has been written ages ago. No one was working on quantum physics, but where did they get that understanding? That fascinates me. They had this. There was something there, regardless of what the exact source of these teachings is. So I'd like to talk more about energy, because energy is actually something that, at the end of the day, we can all go through all these musings, but at the end of the day, we all want to be happy in life, right? So that's the only thing that actually matters. You have to have a tangible result. We can go through like academic books all day long, it doesn't necessarily make us more happy. I think for me, it's really, how can I go through or past the limitations that are apparent in my life, what helps me to go past limitations and to achieve more. That's the only thing that's of interest to me. And sometimes you just have to go through readings and teachings, and maybe some of the clues you find there, they point you towards the right direction. So let's talk about energy and some of that concept of alchemy, of changing energies. So energy is, well, we all have emotions, right? Emotions have energy. And regardless of whether you think that your life is there, you have a soul, you reincarnated because you want to have more energetic breath, or you want to explore, you want to like experience more things, and then that allows you to advance as a soul. It doesn't matter whether you believe in that or not. Like, everyone would agree that so far we all had experiences in our lives. Some were good, or we label them as good, some we label them as bad. And you cannot necessarily count all these experiences. Like, there's countless experiences, regardless of what your age is. You already had a ton of experiences. And let's assume for a second it kind of creates a landscape, you know? You're exploring, your life is exploring a particular landscape. And the longer you live, the more you experience, and so the bigger the landscape is. Now, everyone has their particular landscape, you know, and there might be peaks, very joyful moments, and there might be like deep valleys where you didn't feel that way, that well, that great. And every single one of these positions on the landscape, you can put pictures on it, emotions, almost live stream it. You know, you could put movies on it and like, oh yeah, on that day that happened and that made me feel X, Y, and Z, and that was an experience for me. And I would assume that, or I would put to you that, let's assume we would focus and we would have video footage or pictures or something like that, or audio from a particular day in your life, and it was memorable, there were big emotions, and together we go to that moment, and we go into a room and just like we really try to focus on how you felt that day. I'm pretty sure you could feel very close to how you felt that day if you really try to, whether it's joyful or shit, you know, like if you would really focus on, oh yeah, that happened that day, that happened, and you really let that sink in, you could to some extent reproduce that feeling. And I would just call that energy. You know, it's going to be a vibrational signature, whether you felt shit or whether you felt really great that day. You could reproduce that. And so there's an element of choice in how you feel. Of course, there would be like, okay, I drag you into a room and say, focus on that moment, and then try, and then you would feel a particular way that is reminiscent of a past event or a past day or whatever. But it's still, if it's possible, there's an element of choice. So let's assume I just barge into your life any day of the week and I say, oh yeah, focus on that event, on that energy. You could potentially do it to some extent. I mean, it depends whether something else is going on in your life or what's happening in your environment, but it's possible to go back to something that we experienced. It's like an energetic data bank. So you can, whatever you experience in this life, you can go back because you've already been there. You can't go to something, imagine how it feels to X, Y, and Z. You never experienced it. You can't really imagine. You can't go back to something where you haven't been. So it's your particular landscape. You can potentially go back to any single data point on that landscape. And so, in theory, I would put to you, you definitely had joyful moments in your life. And so you know how it feels like. So the question is, would it be worthwhile every once in a while, or even all the time, sink into that energy and let that be your core signature? Would that be possible? Now, I'm not talking about dancing through the street and laughing all the time I'm not talking about something stupid like that. I'm talking about something that would make your life easier or happier. Just the fact that you understand. And this is something that it's not really understanding either. Like, it's not the mind. The mind always plays tricks. The mind, we'll talk about the mind next time. It's about truly feeling that you have the choice. It has to be felt. It can't be just cognized. It has to be felt. You have the choice right now to feel differently. And what prevents you from using that choice? Now you might say, well, hang on. Like, I'm thinking about the day I got married, or someone else got married, or birth of one of my children. Like, you can't reproduce that. Why would I be as happy as I was then? That's something special. Something special happened that day, so it's fine to use that as a cue to go back into that state, but right now nothing like that is happening in my life, so why would it be? Why would I do that? And this is where it's important to figure out, or again, to feel, not to understand, but to feel that energetic signature had nothing to do, intrinsically, had nothing to do with what happened. Nothing. You being in a particular frequency, that was you. You were in that frequency. Of course, something triggered it, but the energy itself is completely independent from the cue. Completely independent. You can adopt any energy you want right now, like in a completely unconditional way. And the way I talk about it in the book is I take the example of love. We love something, or we love someone, or I fell in love with X, Y, and Z, or I have a dog, I have a cat, whoever, whatever it is. Unconditional love is just the frequency of love. It's not attached to something or someone. Now, you might, the first time you experience really deep love might be based on the trigger of having met someone or having found something that really excites you. That's all fine. But it was just a physical, three-dimensional trigger that allowed you to experience that frequency. It was just a trigger. But if you go deeper, you can choose to have that energetic signature or vibration independently of anything that happens in your life. This is where it goes into the spiritual aspect. It's like, how does it truly feel, that vibration, being in love or being joyful? Sink deeper into how it feels. If you go deep enough, at its root, it is independent of anything three-dimensional. It's you vibrating at a particular frequency, and you can choose to do so anytime you want. Of course, you can also choose to feel shit. It's possible as well. You have free will, so you can do whatever you want. I'm just trying to find ways to how can I make this life a bit happier, or more worthwhile, or be a bit more content in this life. And can we develop ourselves in a way where things don't impact us that hard anymore? Can we just go through life in a better way, a happier way? And this is what could be referred to as energetic transmutation or alchemy. The fact that, well, first of all, it's always important to have distance, right? So initial spiritual evolution or key moments, it's always where there's a distance. Of course, if you're completely identified with how you feel, and well, this happened and then you're always being in reactive mode, there's no distance, so there's no choice there. You're always gonna run around and be impacted by stuff. But it would be very person specific what needs to happen. What are the pointers that you need to truly feel, to have that moment of realization of, hang on, I just chose differently. I'm like, hang on, that doesn't impact me. Hang on, I don't want that. And reach the understanding, the knowledge that you can choose. You can go back to any vibration that you ever had, and obviously the highest peak on that landscape will always be love. Love is the highest frequency, and you'll get back to that after you die. Everything else will be stripped, and suddenly you'll have that realization. Oh, okay. Didn't get that while I was down here. But it is independent from anything else. And you can choose it. And it has also an impact on your general health. Like I'm a biomedical scientist, that's basically what the placebo effect is. You trick yourself, or you're being tricked to like, oh, something might actually help me, or hang on. You're just being tricked. It's like to bypass the issue with the mind, but then there's a beneficial impact. Where did that come from? It's the placebo effect, and there's a reason why we control for it, in biomedical, in randomized controlled trials, because it's real. So I think that's it's the biggest take-home message from today. It's understanding energies, and that's why I come back to energetic literacy. That's why I love to fool around with tarot, astrology, and things like that. It's not for like for the surface stuff. It's like it gives you like the energetic vocabulary, and you need to relearn that if you've never learned it. I mean, you need to be familiar with energies, how they feel. And then the second step is finally being able to reclaim your choice, your energetic choice of not just reacting to the world, but responding to it and exerting your free will. Till next time.